Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I'm going to try to get through a couple of medicinal trees today, and the first one is really appropriate because it's in bloom right now. It's Redbud. I actually just Monday put out my big podcast, the Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast. If you don't listen to that one, maybe you want to check it out. And I talked about all the edible uses of redbud. That is Quercus canadensis. It's actually somewhat medicinal as well, but really important for many reasons. One, it's leguminous. It's a nitrogen-fixing tree. You can plant it in your garden and let your tomatoes climb it or your cucumbers or whatever, and it will fertilize them. But the main thing I like it for is the buds, the blossoms are delicious. They taste like sweet garden peas. This time of year, I'm out harvesting ramps and redbud blossoms like crazy. But let's look a little. It's a beautiful tree too. I mean, it's got those bright, magenta-colored flowers that even grow on the trunk. I mean, it really is a very different kind of tree than most that you will see, where the flowers on the ends of the stems. It's all over the branches, and like I said, even the trunk sometimes. Flowers are nutritious and of course edible, and this was a really important plant for our ancestors who didn't have a lot of fresh vegetables through the winter. So early spring, really the end of winter when redbud starts to bloom, they'd have been gathering those flowers and eating them to get the vitamins they needed. So medicinally, like I said, there's not a lot of medicinal information on this. But the bark is astringent. The inner bark is said to be the most potent. Tea made from the bark is used for fevers and diarrhea. It's also been used in folk medicine for cough and congestion. Beyond that, bees love it. And actually, there's a really old legend that you may have heard of. And this is so appropriate, of course, because this is the Easter weekend. It's believed that Judas, after betraying Jesus, hanged himself from a redbud tree. And you may actually know the tree by the folk name Judas tree, because that's what it's called. It was called traditionally. I don't know. The limbs of a redbud are not very strong, but you remember in the Bible there are two legends actually, or stories, I should say, about Judas. One that he hanged himself, and one that he fell from a height and burst. His guts came out. Could have very well been he did hang himself from a tree. The limb broke and fell to the ground, and he burst open. Redbuds don't grow that tall though, so maybe it was one up on a hill, a cliff. I don't know. It's not impossible that was the same tree, but there's no real archaeological evidence as to that being the tree. Just as there's an old legend that says the dogwood was the tree the cross was made out of. Probably not. But these are two trees that come into flower at about the same time at Easter. And so you can totally understand how these legends kind of build up around them. And I think, I love folklore. To me, that's an endearing story any way you look at it. Well, the dogwood would. Yeah, nothing endearing about hanging oneself, but anyway, you know what I'm saying. I love folklore, but Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests says that redbud or Judas tree, Quercus canadensis, grew abundantly in the swamps around Charleston around the time of the Civil War. Pretty much grows. It doesn't grow quite to my elevation. I have to go down the mountain, so it's. It's Easter weekend. I'm visiting family in Pinehurst, North Carolina, and they're everywhere. Beautiful, bright red trees, and I just had the coolest experience. I think y'all that aren't from the South don't really understand what the South is all about. The way it's portrayed on television is nothing like the real South. I grew up in an area where white folks were the minority. It was majority black and Lumbee Indian, and then the rest of the time on the mountain where there were more, I guess, Cherokee and Catawba Indians than there were black folk. Very few black people in the mountains. No one knows why, but it tends to be a largely Scots-Irish area. Never had any racial issues, honestly. Had black friends growing up, old black ladies that would invite me into their house and give me cookies. I mean, it was just never an issue. Like they act like it is on television. So I was at the grocery store about an hour ago, and there was this little old black lady in there, probably about 90 years old. I mean, she was really up in years. And I said, "Hey, how you doing?" As I was passing by her. And, "I'm doing great. I'm going to see the king." And I looked at her and I'm thinking, man, this is a really old lady. I hope she's okay. I didn't know exactly what. I said, "You going to church?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm going to see King Jesus, and I want you to come with me." And I mean, it's just as sweet as could be. And I told her, well, I actually got a little chest cold right now. I've been dealing with like a little bit of a flu, I think probably for the past week or so. But it's really settled, in my lungs. And I said, I'm not even sure if I'm going to be able to make it for church on Easter. And boy, I mean, she just started praying at the top of her lungs that I would be healed. And I mean, I've never heard of anyone saying stuff like that happens up north or in the Midwest. But man, I mean, that's actually a fairly common occurrence in the South. I've been in that store, the same grocery store in Pinehurst, North Carolina, between Pinehurst and Aberdeen. And it's a Food Lion. And at least 5 times I've spoken to someone, white, black, yeah, maybe Lumbee Indian, but mostly whites and blacks around here. And they just start praying for me. I mean, just like out of the clear blue. It is like so nice is what it is. If you maybe start talking politics to someone, you can get into an argument. But there is nobody around here, and anywhere really in North Carolina, at least outside of Charlotte and Chapel Hill and the really liberal cities, where someone isn't just totally open about their religion, their faith, and I mean mostly Christian, obviously. But I was actually in that same store probably 6 months ago. Yeah, it was in the fall, and there's a big military area, and there's some like translators and such that have come here from Kuwait and Afghanistan and all that. And there was a Muslim fella in there, and I can't remember. I asked him a question. There's a greeting that they usually do, and I couldn't remember how the second word, how it was pronounced. And I said, if you don't mind, I said, I'm not Muslim, but I've known some Muslim folks, and this is the way they greet each other. Am I pronouncing this right? And he was obviously a translator. He walked me through the entire like Arabic history of this language, and just as nice a guy. I mean, people are just so open about their faith in the South. It's wonderful. It really is. And I hope at some point, as much as I do not want to encourage a lot of Yankees to move to North Carolina, we got enough already, trust me, especially in Pinehurst. I do hope y'all get to visit at some point and actually experience the real culture, not the stuff you see on TV and not the stuff you're going to encounter in large cities. Fayetteville's called Vietnam for a reason. It's always had a very high crime rate. A lot of people live there that aren't from there whatsoever. A lot of Muslims actually, a lot of Asians, and most of them are great folks. I mean, yeah, I've known some really fantastic, Chinese, especially Vietnamese. I got a great Vietnamese community. So I mean, I don't have anything against anybody from the outside. It's when somebody moves to the South from the North to make the South like the North. The area they left, the area they got away from because of high taxes and crime. Suddenly they start telling people what to do in the South. That don't fly. Trust me, we don't like that. We don't like that at all. But we're pretty welcoming folks. I mean, to everybody, really. And, I'm going to be doing a plant walk in Pinehurst probably around April 15th, somewhere a weekend, one side or the other of that date, weather depending. So email me, Judson at judsoncarroll.com if you want more information, you want to know what date it is, and maybe you'd like to come join us. People are coming from all over. There's some emails from people who are really interested in it. And this is the Sandhills. A little later in the spring, I'm going to do one in the mountains. So I'll keep you updated on that as well. Mountain culture and Sandhills culture is actually very similar. Both were very heavily settled by the Scots Irish. It's just Sandhills, you got a lot more black folk, and in the mountains, very few actually. And the Indian tribes are different. I mean, down here you have the Lumbees. It's 50,000 members of the Lumbee tribe, so you're going to be running into Lums one way or the other. Up on the mountain, the Cherokee have mostly gravitated toward Cherokee, North Carolina, and you may know several people from the Catawba tribe and not even know that they're Indian, they're Native American. I mean, they just totally blend right in. It's more of a homogeneous culture, I guess I would say, in the mountains as opposed to the sandhills and such. But anyway, back to the redbud tree, which is just gorgeous, growing everywhere around here. And I had a big old handful of the blossoms just a couple of days ago. And I've been out in the mountains, before I got down here this week, harvesting ramps like crazy. So if you want to know about ramps, listen to my Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast, my absolute favorite wild edible. But back to the tree. Resources Southern Fields and Forests says that the blossoms are used in salads. Yes, that's exactly the way I use them. And but are said to be a remedy for urinary complaints and obstructions of the liver and spleen. A decoction of the bark is very astringent. I often combine redbud blossoms with forsythia blossoms. Forsythia is bright yellow. It's blooming right now as well. The white, like stem end of forsythia is very bitter, so pluck that off, and then you can combine the two in salads. You can throw them in with some butter, olive oil, and salt, and cook them. I mean, they're really, really delicious. And one of those like really pretty garnishes if you want to impress a lady, bake some fish or something, or some chicken, do maybe a lemon pepper chicken. I could go for that right now. And put some forsythia and redbud blossoms, maybe a few violet flowers, over the top, and that always goes over very well. But Peterson Field Guide for Eastern and Central Medicinal Plants says the inner bark is highly astringent. An obscure medicinal agent was once used for diarrhea and dysentery. They mean it. It's very poorly worded. They just mean it was used for diarrhea and dysentery, but we don't know much about it these days because it's fallen out of use. Therefore, it's become obscure. But apparently, it was also a folk cancer remedy for leukemia. I have absolutely no more information on that. If you're interested, I never recommend any herbs for cancer. It's like, I draw the line. I don't want to get people's hopes up. Who knows? But if you have an interest in herbs to treat leukemia, you may want to do some more research on that. See if there's any documentation in medical journals. And they say the flowers are edible. They're actually quite delicious. Now, the other one I wanted to do today, very short entry on, this is so hard to pronounce. It is Chamaecyparis. Cypress. And the second word is Thyoides, Thyoides. So, Chamaecyparis thyoides is the closest I'm going to get to it. It's called Atlantic white cedar, which is crazy easier to say, and I'm just going to stick with Atlantic white cedar. There's only one variety in my region. It grows down the coastal swamps. It's actually fairly common in the swamps, up into the sand hills. Well, I shouldn't say common. I've seen it, I knew it growing up in the swampy area of the eastern United States. My grandparents' farm, Bladen County, it was there. I recognized this tree when I saw it. It's called white cedar, but it's actually a cypress. Got a lot of cypress in the swamp. Tons of cypress in the swamp. And although it was very likely used medicinally by Native Americans, that'd be like the Waccamaw and the Lumbee in the area, and the Chicora, I haven't been able to find anything in Native American herbal medicine. They didn't write it down. What can I say? But it has been used medicinally in other regions. Plants for a Future lists white Atlantic white cedar, also called white cypress, by the way. I'm not going to try to pronounce the Latin name again. It says a decoction of the leaves has been used as an herbal steam for treating headaches and backaches.